If you're trying to access a nut or a bolt that's in a tight spot, having a universal joint makes a huge difference. So the question is that $10 universal joint just as good as the one that costs $200? Well, let's find out. At a price of $10 is this EPAuto brand. It has a black phosphate coating designed to resist oxidation. It's a 3-piece universal joint set designed for impact tools. It locks onto drive tang and socket. It's made of hardened treated chrome vanadium steel alloy. And the EPAuto is made in Taiwan. And the 3/8" EPAuto weighs 64.96 grams. And the EPAuto offers a lot of range of motion at almost 80 degrees. For this next test, I purchased a new 3/8" impact wrench and 3 brand new batteries so we can keep the batteries fully charged during all the testing. I also bought a bunch of 5/8" grade 8 nuts, bolts, and washers. This test will cause a lot of wear and tear, so I'll replace the bolts after testing each of the universal joints. Let's see how much clamp load the Milwaukee can deliver in 5 seconds with just an impact socket. And the Milwaukee blasted right past 10,000 pounds, and it didn't take long to reach 20,000 pounds of clamp load. And it's 20,407 pounds of clamp load in only 5 seconds. Slowing things down quite a bit, the torque from the impact wrench is doing a great job of transferring to the bolt without any excess wobble or motion. Let's use the torque adapter to see how much torque it takes to achieve 20,000 pounds. And it takes almost 250 foot-pounds of torque. Before we test the EPAuto, let's see how much slop exists. And it's 28.1 degrees of slop. And the Milwaukee is really struggling to transfer the torque to the very sloppy and loose EPAuto universal joint. And the EPAuto only made it to 10,009 pounds, or less than half the torque of using a socket only. Slowing things down, it's pretty obvious why there's reduced torque transmission from the impact wrench to the bolt. And the impact wrench just about destroyed the EPAuto, and one of the pins is about to fall out of the universal joint. And the 3/8" EPAuto started off at 28.1 degrees when new, and now it's at 30.3 degrees. At a price of $12 is this Pittsburgh brand, which is sold at Harbor Freight. The Pittsburgh Pro is also designed to be used with impact tools. And the Pittsburgh is made in Taiwan. EPAuto is on the left and the Pittsburgh is on the right, and there's definitely a difference between the two brands. And the Pittsburgh weighs 65.39 grams. And the Pittsburgh offers 73.2 degrees of articulation. And 28.1 degrees of slop is about the same as the EPAuto. And the Pittsburgh lasted about a half a second before the old Harbor Freight death wobble kicked in. And the Milwaukee is vibrating badly and absorbing a lot of the wasted torque. And 8,772 pounds is about 1,300 pounds less than the EPAuto. And the Milwaukee just about destroyed the Pittsburgh Pro in 5 seconds. Now that's a lot of damage. And the Pittsburgh started off at 28.1 degrees and now it's at 39.9. At a price of $14 is this Casoman brand. It has a high contrast size marking. And the Casoman is made in China. And it's 100.48 grams for the Casoman. With a single joint setup, the Casoman offers 30.7 degrees of angular freedom. And 11.6 degrees is a lot better than the EPAuto and the Pittsburgh. And the Casoman only made it to 9,256 pounds of clamp load. And there's just way too much impact energy dissipation taking place with the Casoman. And the Casoman started off at 11.6 and now it's at 15.5 degrees, or almost 4 degrees of extra slop. Also at a price of $14, the same price as the Casoman brand is this Wett brand. Just like the previous brand, it's made of chrome moly steel with black phosphate finish. And the Wett universal joint is made in China. And it's 95.19 grams for the Wett. And the Wett offers pretty good range of motion at 37.9 degrees. And 8.1 degrees is the best yet. While the Wett has less side-to-side slop than the Casoman, it really struggled to apply the torque to the bolt. And 9,057 pounds is almost 1,000 pounds behind the EPAuto. And there's just way too much in and out movement taking place to deliver torque to the bolt. And the Wett gained just over 3 degrees of play at 11.2. At a price of $17 is this Duratech brand. The innovative ball design can help handle high torque from impact tools. Chamfered ends allows for smooth socket insertion. Spring-loaded detent ball will prevent the socket from slipping and dropping. And the Duratech is made in China. And the Duratech weighs 98.18 grams. And the Duratech offers the least amount of range of motion yet at 28.4 degrees. However, 7.5 degrees of play is the best yet. And the Duratech blasted into the lead at right past 10,000 pounds in less than 2 seconds. And it's over for the Duratech at 11,386 pounds at 5 seconds. The Duratech has quite a bit of in and out travel, but it did a great job of transferring the torque. And the Duratech held up extremely well at only 8.7 degrees, or just 1.2 degrees of extra slop. I'll be testing 2 different sets of universal joints made by Craftsman. The first one is a 3-piece set that's not designed for impact tools and comes at a price of $17. We're about to find out if the impact rating really makes any difference. They claim it meets or exceeds ASME standards. And the Craftsman brand is made in Taiwan. And it's 59.89 grams for the Craftsman. 83.7 degrees of motion is the most yet. And 19.6 degrees is quite a bit of slop. And the Craftsman has way too much wobble to make a lot of torque. And the Craftsman ran out of steam at 9,204 pounds. Definitely not designed for use with impact tools, but the Craftsman held up better than the EPAuto and the Pittsburgh with less than 2 degrees of additional slop. At a price of $17 is this Showmemy brand. Made of full impact grade resistant steel that's very durable. They claim that it pivots smoothly and securely. The Showmemy is made in China. And the Showmemy weighs 97.93 grams. And the Showmemy has the least amount of range of motion yet at 25.6 degrees. 9.4 degrees of slop is pretty good. And the Showmemy is putting on a show and blasted right past 10,000 pounds. And 12,630 pounds is good enough to move into the lead over the Duratech. 10.2 degrees is just 1.2 degrees of extra slop. At a price of $19 is this NEIKO brand. The sizes are laser etched into the sides. And the NEIKO is made in Taiwan. And it's 99.25 grams for the NEIKO. And the NEIKO has more range of motion than the Showmemy at 34.9 degrees. However, 13.5 degrees is quite a bit of slop compared to the Showmemy. And the NEIKO just isn't hitting as hard as the Showmemy. However, the NEIKO still performed better than average at 10,384 pounds. The NEIKO started off at 13.5 degrees and really loosened up to 17.7. At a price of $19 is this Workpro brand, made of drop-forged heat-treated chrome moly steel. And the Workpro is made in China. And the Workpro weighs 97.78 grams. And the Workpro offers 28.6 degrees of angle. And the Workpro has less slop than most of the other brands at only 8.9 degrees. And the Workpro is making torque quickly just like the Duratech. And the Duratech moves into second place behind the Showmemy at 11,397 pounds. Just like the Workpro, the Duratech is hitting really hard. At only 10.6 degrees of slop, the Workpro held up really well. At a price of $23 is this Libration brand. It's constructed of impact grade chrome moly steel. And the Libration is made in China. And it's 97.44 grams for the Libration. And the Libration is only at 25.7 degrees of range of motion. And 11.9 degrees is more slop than the Workpro. The Libration is hitting hard, but not quite as hard as the Workpro. And 10,992 pounds is around 400 pounds less than the Workpro, but still really strong performance. The Libration held up well, only going from 11.9 degrees to 12.8. At a price of $24 is this Capri Tools brand. It comes with a limited lifetime warranty. They claim it also meets ASME standards. And the Capri Tools is made in Taiwan. And the Capri Tools weighs 91.9 grams. And it's 32.1 degrees for the Capri Tools, and it has 11.2 degrees of play. Unfortunately, the Capri Tools really struggle to make torque. And the universal joint is out of steam at 9,891 pounds of clamp load. And 13.7 degrees of slop is about the same as the Libration. At a price of $25 is this Lexivon brand. They claim that it has a patented slim design. They claim that their universal joints meet or exceed ANSI standards. There's no information on the packaging regarding where they're manufactured. The Capri Tools is on the left and the Lexivon is on the right, and there's a big difference in the diameter. And the Lexivon is pretty light at 78.94 grams. And the Lexivon is pretty compact but doesn't have much range of motion at 28.8 degrees. 11 degrees of slop is about the same as the Capri Tools. And the Lexivon just isn't hitting nearly as hard as many of the other brands. And time is up, and it's 8,681 pounds. And the Lexivon experienced a lot of damage going from 11 to 17.1 degrees of slop. At a price of $25 is this two-piece Icon set, which is sold at Harbor Freight. It does not include the quarter-inch drive. The Harbor Freight website compares the Icon brand to the Snap-on brand, and the Snap-on brand costs about 5 to 6 times as much. They're supposed to withstand heavy-duty impact use. And the Icon universal joints are made in Taiwan. And it's 98.7 grams for the Icon. And the Harbor Freight Icon is at 30.1 degrees, and it has 12.1 degrees of slop. And the Icon is also struggling to hit as hard as some of the other brands. And it's 9,520 pounds for the Icon. The Icon did experience some wear and tear at 14.5 degrees of slop. At a price of $38 is this GearWrench brand. It has a manganese phosphate finish to resist corrosion. Their universal joints are supposed to meet or exceed ASME specifications. And the GearWrench is made in Taiwan. And the GearWrench weighs 91.76 grams. And the GearWrench offers good range of motion at 35.1 degrees. And 8.9 degrees is quite a bit better than average. And the GearWrench is hitting hard and is building torque quickly. And the GearWrench is finished less than 100 pounds behind the Showmemy. And the GearWrench now is at 12.2 degrees of play. At a price of $48 is this Sunex Tools brand. They claim that their universal joint is designed to handle high torque impact tools. They claim that their radius corner design reduces wear and increases torque. And the Sunex Tools is made in Taiwan. And the Sunex is the heaviest yet at 101.17 grams. And the Sunex offers 29.3 degrees and it has 9.8 degrees of slop. And the Sunex just isn't hitting nearly as hard as the GearWrench. And 9,808 pounds is about 2,700 pounds less than the GearWrench. And the Sunex is now at 12.5 degrees. At a price of $50 is this Craftsman brand. Their universal joints are supposed to meet or exceed ASME specifications. They're supposed to come with a full lifetime warranty. And the Craftsman is made in Taiwan. The Sunex is on the left and the Craftsman is on the right, and there's a big difference between the two brands regarding build construction. The Craftsman is quite a bit lighter than most at 77.21 grams. And the Craftsman is at 29.5 degrees and has a tremendous amount of slop at 20.5 degrees. And the Craftsman is very compact, but it just isn't able to hit nearly as hard as many of the other brands at 9,878 pounds. And the Craftsman is now really sloppy at 23.1 degrees. At a price of $110 is this Stanley Proto brand, designed to withstand high torque and force associated with impact tools in repetitive application. Features 2 through holes and a groove to accept Proto retaining ring or pin and O-ring to help secure the socket and drive onto anvil. And the Proto is made in USA. And it's right at 93 grams for the Proto. And the Stanley Proto is at 34.6 degrees and 8.2 degrees of slop. And the Proto just isn't hitting as hard as some of the other brands. And it's 9,692 pounds after 5 seconds. And the Proto has really loosened up and is now at 12.5 degrees of slop. And the most expensive brand we'll be testing is made by Snap-on. It costs $208 before shipping, handling, and tax, and $254 after. Welded pivot pin reinforces socket wall and allows a full 30-degree angle. They claim that their slim outside diameter increases accessibility. Proto's on the left and Snap-on is on the right, and the Snap-on definitely has a much more narrow profile. And the Snap-on is made in USA. And the Snap-on is by far the heaviest yet at 116 grams. And the Snap-on offers more range of motion than advertised at 33.3 degrees and only has 7.6 degrees of slop. And the Snap-on is hitting really hard and it made it to 10,000 pounds quickly. And the Snap-on is finally finished at 11,955 pounds. And the Snap-on held up really well at 9.8 degrees of play. So the very affordable Showmemy came out on top at 12,630 pounds. GearWrench finished in second place at 12,534 and Snap-on third at 11,955. After all the testing, the Duratech has the least amount of slop at 8.7 degrees. Snap-on finished in second place at 9.8 degrees and Showmemy third at 10.2. Before we test the half-inch universal joints, let's test the quality of the spring-loaded detent balls or pins. Let's see which brand does the best job of holding on to the socket. And the EPAuto let go at 2,176 grams or 4.8 pounds. And the Pittsburgh Pro held onto the socket like a pro at over 4 kilograms or just about 9 pounds. And the Casoman moves into second place behind the EPAuto at 2,628 grams. And the Wett performed by far the best yet at over 6 kilograms or around 13 pounds. The Duratech moves into third place behind the Pittsburgh at 3,236 grams or about 7 pounds. And the Craftsman performed even better than the Duratech at 3,542 grams or just under 8 pounds. And the Showmemy is putting on a show once again at 6,278 grams or almost 14 pounds to move into the lead. And the NEIKO performed about the same as the Craftsman at 3,582 grams or just under 8 pounds. And the Workpro really struggled in this test at only 1,396 grams or about 3 pounds. And the Libration also struggled at just under 2 kilograms or just over 4 pounds. And the Capri tools performed about average at close to 3.5 kilos or about 7.71 pounds. And the Lexivon performed better than average at 4,056 grams or close to 9 pounds. The Icon also performed a little bit better than average at 3,692 grams or just over 8 pounds. And the GearWrench let go of the socket at 3,420 grams or just under 6 pounds. The Sunex performed about the same as the GearWrench at 3,722 grams or very close to 7 pounds. And the Craftsman performed a little below average at 3,188 grams or 7 pounds. And the Stanley Proto has a detent pin and it refused to let go at close to 8 kilograms or over 17 pounds. And the Snap-on performed quite a bit better than average at 5,846 grams or almost 13 pounds. And the Stanley with the detent pin came out on top and never released from the socket. Showmemy finished in second place at 13.84 pounds and Wett third at 13.29. The Milwaukee is rated for 1,100 foot-pounds of tightening torque and 1,600 pounds of loosening torque. The Milwaukee makes way too much torque on the highest setting, so let's use the lowest torque setting. With only a socket, about 21,300 pounds of clamp load with the Milwaukee. And the half-inch EPAuto started off at 12.6 degrees. And the EPAuto blasted right past 10,000 pounds. After 5 seconds, almost 16,000 pounds for the EPAuto. And the EPAuto loosened up by 3.4 degrees. Let's see if the universal joints can handle the full wrath of the Milwaukee. I'll set the Milwaukee to the highest torque setting and we'll run it for 5 seconds in the loosening as well as tightening directions. I had to stop the test on the EPAuto as both pins vibrated loose and this thing is about to fly apart. Definitely a light duty tool. Let's see how much wear and tear just took place. I pushed the pins back into position, and the EPAuto went from 17 to 19.8 degrees of slop. And the Pittsburgh is starting out very loose at 15.3 degrees. The Pittsburgh ran out of steam at 13,544 pounds, or about 2,400 pounds less than the EPAuto. And the Pittsburgh is really loose at 18.4 degrees. And the Pittsburgh did stay together, but it is a handful to manage with all the slop in the universal joint. And now there's a tremendous amount of wear and tear at 23 degrees. And the brand new half-inch Casoman is nice and tight at 3.5 degrees. Unfortunately, the Casoman really struggled to transfer torque at 13,460 pounds. And the Casoman loosened up just a little to 4.9 degrees. And 5 seconds of tightening torque and 5 seconds of loosening torque is really putting the Casoman to the test. And the Casoman actually held up pretty well at 6.4 degrees of play. And the Wett is starting out with even less slop than the Casoman at 2.7 degrees. Even though there is less slop, the Wett isn't hitting nearly as hard as the Casoman. And the Wett is now at 4.5 degrees of play. And a total of 10 seconds on the highest impact setting is a lot of abuse. And the Wett started out new at 2.7 degrees and now it's at 7.3. The Duratech has a little more slop than the Casoman and the Wett at 4.9 degrees. However, the Duratech is doing a better job of transferring the torque to the test bolt, and 15,416 pounds is good enough to move into second place. And the Duratech loosened up quite a bit to 7.1 degrees. And the 10-second rodeo caused 4 degrees of additional play in the Duratech. And the Craftsman is starting off with quite a bit of slop at 10.2 degrees. And the Craftsman really struggled to transfer the impact from the Milwaukee at 13,711 pounds. The universal joint is now at 12.6 degrees of wobble, and 10 seconds of action just about destroyed the Craftsman as the pins are about to fall out. I reset the pins and the Craftsman is now at 15.2 degrees of play. The Showmemy is starting out at 5.7 degrees of wobble. The Showmemy has performed well throughout the showdown, and the Showmemy just moved into the lead at 16,407 pounds. And the universal joint is now at 7.8 degrees. It's a pretty intense 10 seconds and there's a lot of vibration with each universal joint. And the Showmemy loosened up quite a bit to 11.3 degrees. And the NEIKO is starting off at 4.4 degrees. The NEIKO performed better than average at 15,253 pounds. And the NEIKO is now at 6.2 degrees. And the 5-second torture test took a toll on the NEIKO and is now at 11.5 degrees of play. And the Workpro is at 5.5 degrees. The Workpro has performed well throughout the showdown and it just put up the biggest number yet at 19,341 pounds. And all that torque came at a price at 8.1 degrees of play. From the feel of the impact wrench, the Workpro is hitting pretty hard. And the hard hitting does come at a price as the Workpro is now at 12.4 degrees of wobble. The Libration is pretty loose at 6.9 degrees. And the Libration just doesn't hit nearly as hard as the Workpro at 14,211 pounds of clamp load. The Libration is now at 8.3 degrees. Even though the Libration doesn't hit as hard, the torture test is taking a toll on the universal joint. And the Libration is very sloppy and loose at 12.9 degrees. And the Capri Tools is a tank and is pretty tight at 4.1 degrees of play. And the Capri Tools use a size advantage to put up a big number at 17,299 pounds. And the Capri Tools held up better than most at 5.6 degrees. And 10 seconds of hard-hitting blows in the Capri Tools is still pretty tight at 6.8 degrees. And the Lexivon is starting off pretty loose at 6.3 degrees. And the loose fit didn't hurt the Lexivon as it moves into second place behind the Workpro at just under 18,000 pounds. And the Lexivon loosened up to 8.2 degrees. After 10 seconds of intense blows from the Milwaukee, the Lexivon is at 11.7 degrees of play. And the Icon is pretty tight at 4.3 degrees. And the Icon is also built like a tank and moves into second place behind the Workpro at 18,247 pounds. And the Icon is still pretty tight at 5.1 degrees. After 10 seconds of impact, the Icon held up better than most of the other brands at 7.3 degrees of play. Just like the Icon, the GearWrench is starting off at 4.3 degrees. And the GearWrench performed better than average at 16,386 pounds. And 5.9 degrees of play isn't quite as good as the Icon. And the GearWrench survived the 10-second rodeo just fine, but it did experience a little bit more wear than the Icon at 7.9 degrees. And the Sunex is starting out at 6.3 degrees. The Sunex also performed better than average and easily made it past 16,000 pounds. And 8.2 degrees is a little more play than the Icon and the GearWrench. And 10 seconds of intense impact really loosened up the Sunex at 11.4 degrees. Just like the 3/8 Craftsman universal joint, the half-inch Craftsman is pretty loose at 14.9 degrees. And the Craftsman performed better than average at 16,958 pounds. And the Craftsman is now at 15.6 degrees. And the Craftsman is quite the handful to manage during the 10-second rodeo. The Impact universal joint is now at 17.1 degrees, the most of all the single joint adapters. And the Proto has the least amount of slop yet at 2.6 degrees. And the Proto performed about the same as the Icon at 18,157 pounds. However, the Proto held up a lot better and is now at only 2.9 degrees of play. Very impressive. And the Proto seems to be enjoying the 10-second torture test. The Proto is definitely the most durable universal joint at only 3.9 degrees of slot. Very impressive. And the snap-on is starting off at 2.6 degrees, just like the Proto. And the snap-on just blasted past 18,000 pounds and it made it all the way to 19,428 pounds at 5 seconds. Very impressive. And the snap-on is still in very good condition at 3.7 degrees. And the snap-on also seems to be enjoying the impact test just a little too much. And the very compact snap-on is almost as durable as the much larger Proto at 4.3 degrees. When it comes to universal joint efficiency and transferring torque, the snap-on came out on top at 19,428 pounds. The very affordable Workpro finished in second place at 19,341 pounds and Icon third at 18,247. Durability is another factor to consider, and the Stanley Proto only experienced 1.3 degrees of additional play after the impact and the torture test. Snap-on is the second most durable at 1.7 degrees and Craftsman third at 2.2. Taking a close look at the universal joints under a microscope, there's a huge difference among the brands. For example, there's a tremendous amount of wear and tear from the steel pin pounding against the socket with the Duratech. On the other hand, the snap-on socket has a much larger center pin and there's no visible wear to the steel pin or the socket. Some of the universal joints have a lot of girth and just won't fit in a tight spot. For the 3/8" universal joints, the Pittsburgh, EPAuto, and Craftsman have the most narrow profiles. However, all three of those are double jointed and not nearly as durable as the single jointed adapters. The Craftsman, Lexivon, and Stanley Proto offer the narrowest profile for the 3/8" adapters. For the 1/2" adapters, once again, the first three brands are double jointed adapters. The Craftsman, Lexivon, and NEIKO offer the narrowest profile for the 1/2" adapters. So which brand is the best? I've converted raw values into a ranking and the universal joints are organized based upon average finish. And the snap-on had by far the best average finish of 2.3. It's definitely the best universal joint in the lineup, but it is extremely expensive. The Stanley Proto finished in second place with an average finish at 4.3. The Proto is also very expensive at a price of $110 per set. The 1/2" Proto universal joint is very durable, but it's also very large, which may be a problem. If it's all about value, I really like the Showmemy. It's not as durable as a snap-on, but for a price of only $17, it outperformed a lot more expensive brands with an average finish of 5.7. Definitely a great tool for the price. It's always a good day when affordable products perform well. Please let me know your thoughts if you'd like to see a review on universal impact sockets. I'd like to put together a review, but it is very expensive, so I just want to make sure that there's a lot of interest. All the videos in this channel, including this one, are viewer suggested, so if you have a video idea, I hope you'll take time to leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Please take care and look forward to next time.